doubt can be pleasing to God, I believe, if it's evidence that we are thinking about important things. It's also important to expose error. Think about Galileo. Error was exposed because he began to question the dominant thinking about the way the universe worked. But had he never questioned or never thought about it further, that evidence would have not been investigated. So oftentimes, if we want to make sure that we're believing the right thing, how do you do that? You can't make sure that you believe the right thing unless you explore it in the context of alternatives and ask hard questions and see what shakes out as firm. So in order to do that, you got to ask the questions, right? So it can be good in that way. Honest doubt benefits us by forcing us, I think, to become more authentic with God. How many people in Scripture told God, "Where are you?" How many people in Scripture expressed their feelings honestly and said, "Where are you, God? I don't know if you're even here." Job, David. I mean, all of those things force us to be more authentic with God instead of pretending we don't have questions, even though He knows that we do, right? But in the end, the difference between irreverence and those honest questions is not seeking to just throw stones at God, but asking Him from our heart, "I need help. I need help with this." It provides clarity, well-defined beliefs. If you don't ask questions about your faith, if you live long enough and talk to enough people, they're going to ask you questions about your faith. And if you have never considered why you believe what you believe, you won't have good answers for them. So it helps us to have good, well-defined beliefs. It also helps us increase autonomy. Think about the Bereans in Acts 17. They thought for themselves. They didn't just accept what they were told, they also searched the Scriptures, right? And that's good for us to do. Some people may look at the concept of faith as a cop-out. That's just what they tell you when they don't have any good answers. Just have faith, just have faith. And there are times where we may do that, and it wouldn't be a good thing to do that. However, the idea of faith itself, see, faith is not a blind belief. Blind faith really is kind of like an oxymoron, because faith by nature is saying, okay, I have a body of evidence here, but there's some questions that remain, but based on what I know, I can have faith in what I don't know because I've got enough. Okay? So when you stand ready to cross the road, you're going to look, see if there's a car, maybe you look twice, maybe you look again. If you're holding the hands of children, maybe you look a third time. Can your eyes deceive you? Yes. Is it possible there's something you didn't see? Yes. Eventually you got to step across the road. So when we live life, everyday life, we live by faith in many ways. Whether you're religious or not, you live by faith. The question is, what is it based on? What is it based on? Okay, so faith is inherent in what it means to be human. Why? Well, because the only way to not have to have any faith in anything is to know everything. By the time you have knowledge, the faith is done away with, right? There is a part of the faith that vanishes because you receive the knowledge and answer that question, okay? A firm question. I would say you still have some faith, even because you have to trust the basic reliability of your senses and that you're not dreaming and that the evidence given to you is not tainted. And in other words, it's difficult to ever come to a place and say, well, yeah, you don't need faith anymore. Why? Because you're human. You don't know everything. The only way to get rid of any need for any faith is to have all of the answers and have it with certainty, which would make you God. So the only way God can create creatures who have zero need for faith is to create another self. But because it is His nature not to be created, He's not going to be creating another self. So any being that God brings into existence is not going to know everything, which means they're going to have faith, because that's what it means, right? So faith is not a cop-out. The idea of faith overall just is inherent in what it means to be finite. Okay? The question is, what is it based on, and is that good enough to step into the unknown and take a step across the road? Right? If an infinite, all-powerful being exists, would we expect that we would understand everything about Him as finite beings? I'm not saying even if you don't believe in Him, theoretically, If an all-powerful, infinite, immaterial being existed, would we expect that finite material beings would be able to comprehend everything about him? No. Like the expectation would be that we can't, right? So to say that there are some things about God that we can't understand, that we must have faith about, is not a cop-out. It is logically the only way that it could be, that there will be some things we can't understand. So the question is, how much can we, and how much evidence is it based on to accept the things we can't know? Should we ask God to be less than he is, that we might believe in him? It's not even a logical question, right? Okay, so let's say that you are getting down to some questions, and you have questions, and you wonder, are my doubts, are they real, are they not, what should I do about them? What should you do? Here are some helpful things, at least I hope they are, that I would tell you to do. Number one, don't panic, okay? Sometimes I think that may happen. You start to have questions, and immediately the very presence of questions means, uh-oh, it's all collapsing. Again, having questions is part of what it means to be human. You would expect to have them, okay? So having them means nothing. Having a question doesn't mean anything by itself. It requires investigation, okay? It's a normal and natural to have questions. In fact, I would say if you're not asking questions about anything, you're just really walking around dangerously. Don't go it alone. Don't go it alone, and you're not alone. I would say don't go it alone in that I would not just never talk to anybody about it, never tell anybody about it, never ask any questions, and just feel as though you're the only person in the room that has it. Every other person sitting in here is a strong Christian, and that's why they don't have any questions, and I have questions, and that must mean something about... No, that's not true. Augustine, seen by many as a great mind of faith, once said, I wish I could be made just as certain of things I cannot see as I am certain that 7 plus 3 make 10. Martin Luther battled doubt. He wrote, for more than a week, Christ was wholly lost to me. I was shaken by desperation and blasphemy against God. There's a famous evangelist who I would not be on page with theologically, but nevertheless, considered a person of church history significance. D.L. Moody said there was a church in Boston that refused him membership because they said his beliefs seemed a little too uncertain. Okay? I don't think he was completely uncertain about his faith, but I do think he had more questions than what they were comfortable with. However, what I'm saying is you're not alone in asking honest questions. Okay? The heroes of faith throughout Scripture, again, ask God why. A lot, okay? That's okay. Number 3, ask, what do you want to believe? Why is that a good first question? It does. And that motivation can reveal, I think, some of those other forms of doubt we talked about. Right? I think a good question when you ask somebody is, do you want to believe in the Christian faith? That doesn't mean if you want to, ignore the evidence against it and just do it. That's not the point of that question. But it's a good question because if you don't want to believe the Christian faith, if you want to believe that it's false, you can latch on to any uncertainty and find ways to dismiss it. So, like, for example, we'll talk about it in this sermon series, the issue of hell. And some people say, why would a loving God send people to hell? Why would hell even exist? And I have had a conversation with someone who said that you can't, I just can't believe in Christianity because of hell. But the truth is, there are tons of theologians walking around out there who do not believe the Bible supports an eternal torment and punishment. In other words, I don't believe that's supported by the text. But what I'm saying is, if you want to believe in Christianity, there's actually another viable option within Christendom that gets rid of that thing that you doubt. Or maybe it's different than what you think when we actually study the issue. However, what I'm saying is, to dismiss it and say, because of this issue, I can't believe in Christianity. No, that's not true, actually. Within Christendom, that's not true. But there, I think, oftentimes, maybe other reasons. But I definitely understand why the emotion of that issue is so big. If someone doesn't want to believe in God, there's a reason, or I would say there's not a lot of reason to reason. There are other things that would have to be addressed first. And then, what kind of doubt are you dealing with? Right? That's a good question to ask because it tailors approach to dealing with your doubts. As we've already talked about, what is the nature of it? And therefore, what does it require to deal with it? Number 5 would be watching unrealistic expectations. What do you think some of those might be? Unrealistic expectations of the investigation of the Christian faith. Yeah. The health and wealth gospel is dangerous in that it provides an unrealistic expectation of what Christianity is like. And because of that, when Christianity isn't a bed of roses, and your life doesn't have you still have problems in your life, it can cause us to kind of walk away from that. That's that part of that disappointed doubt. There is a realistic expectations of the nature of the faith evidence process. What we've kind of talked about, what faith means and what it means to how many questions are you still going to have at the end of it. If I still have a single question, well, then it can't be true, that kind of stuff. Reasonable doubt is sometimes a phrase we use, beyond a reasonable doubt, or what is the best explanation here given the evidence, even though we still have questions. Those are more realistic. The fact that we can't completely understand God and have questions is not a cop-out, right? So of yourself, I think, can be an unrealistic expectation. Be patient with yourself. Learn as you go. You may want to find every answer to every question in 24 hours, but theologians have been pondering a lot of these questions for centuries. And I believe come to some good answers. However, the expectation of knowing everything is a false one, and also of God. We have unrealistic expectations, I believe, of God sometimes. One of those would be, I need undeniable proof. The reason that's an unrealistic expectation is that humans with free will, whom God is not going to force to believe something, could deny anything. You could deny even God coming miraculously from the heavens and saying, hey, here I am, as a mirage, if you really want to. At that point, the only way God could make you believe it would be to make you believe it, which of course He's not going to do if we have free will. So the idea that something is undeniable, cannot be denied, is an unrealistic expectation. That doesn't mean it doesn't have great evidence. But the fact that someone would say, if someone can object to it, I won't believe it. I got news for you. People can object to anything. Okay, so we have to be a little more honest about that. Number 6 would be, don't allow doubt by intimidation. And what I mean by that is sometimes we may doubt because those who cast doubt on our faith are highly educated. They have a PhD, and I have a high school diploma. So how could I be right and them be wrong? Okay, that kind of question. That's a legitimate question. Like, because people who are highly studied, right? And if I haven't studied it a lot and they have studied it a lot, well, then it makes sense that they may know more about the subject than me. So it does have a bearing on us saying, okay, well, PhD scientists say this about the universe, and I believe this about the universe. Now, there are other PhD scientists who say what you believe about the universe if you believe in God, but the dominant narrative may not be that. However, again, there is no replacement for motive or choice in what we believe, okay? And there is no replacement for, there is always that option to choose on the basis of motivation that we may or may not know. It may also be the case that people, and I have heard those in the academic community talk about the pressure from the academic community to believe one thing or the other to keep your job, to be taken seriously, and sometimes that has a bearing on what people choose to do. And John Lennox, a professor of mathematics at Oxford, he's one of the world's leading physicists. He responded to Stephen Hawking's attempt to explain the creation of the universe with gravity. In Lennox's book, God and Stephen Hawking, he said, "Nonsense remains nonsense even when talked about by world-famous scientists." Now, you still need to judge the basis of Hawking's theory on its own merit. However, his overall point is, just because somebody is highly educated and says something doesn't mean it's automatically true. So, yes, they've got... Yeah. Yeah. And there are good questions that can be asked about that. We did a class called Divine Diplomacy where we talked about appeal to expert witness, which is sometimes what we do, which is what we should do. A lot of times we say, okay, well, where are the experts and what do they know? But there are other questions that need to be asked surrounding that rather than just always accepting what someone says because of the letters behind their name. There sometimes remain other questions. What is their past credibility? How close are they to the subject they're actually talking about, et cetera, et cetera. Stephen Hawking made a lot of statements about morality and philosophy, and he is not studied in the realm of philosophy, but a lot of people took his word just for what it is because he was so good at physics, right? But so that's kind of a fallacy of expert witness. He's an expert in one thing, therefore he must be trusted in these other fields, which isn't necessarily true. Admit bias in research, okay? Just admit it right out the gate. Say, if I want to believe something, but I'm coming to the research, okay, I want to believe it and I like it to be this way. Does that mean that bias has to dictate where you end up? No, okay? However, it's helpful to admit it, okay? There's a book called The Historicity of the Resurrection, and it's enormous. And at the beginning, I appreciate that he starts off by saying, I'm going to lay all my biases out right here at the front gate so that you know where I'm coming from, what my history is, what my Christian upbringing is, so that you know that it's already geared towards this. And here's how I'm trying to deal with that bias so that it hasn't affected this evidence. That's a really noble thing to do at the outset of your research you're presenting. Okay, so read widely. Okay, talk to other people. That helps to keep bias in check. All right? Start in the right place and have patience. Many people want to start in the darkest corner, the most challenging, most obscure parts of their questions about Christianity, and then if they can't find all of the helpful information they want from that, it's gone. We don't do that anywhere else. Think about a court of law, and we've got a murder case here. We don't say, all right, Your Honor, let's start with all of the stuff we don't know, and then we'll get to the evidence later. That's not how it works. We say, let's lay all the evidence out on the table, let's discuss it, and then let's talk about the things we don't know yet based on that evidence, right? So that's the actual process of investigation. Someone may want to start with, why does God allow suffering in the world? Okay? That's a hard place to start with if you don't have a good concept of who the Bible even says God is, of the nature of justice, of the nature of morality, of the nature of free will that God has given to us, the nature of constants in the universe. There are so many other aspects. What is the definition of love when we talk about a loving God? What does that mean? What does love allow? What does it not allow? There are other fundamental concepts that have to be nailed down before you can talk about that intelligently, right? So I would say when you're having discussions with people, to zoom out and say, what are the fundamental things that we need to establish first about the nature of the universe, whether the supernatural can exist, whether God might exist. Start back further before you go further into some of the more details. Be careful thinking with your heart. If you're on a bridge and I say, don't look down, why do I say that? Because if you look down, the bridge will suddenly become more unstable. No, it won't. You will become more unstable. And that's why I say don't look down. So a lot of times we do want to think with our emotions, and it's hard to separate them sometimes. But phrases like, I just don't see how God could, or this just couldn't be because I feel like, or I just really feel that. Now, if those have been educated by a body of evidence that has informed the way that you think and feel, okay, but we need to examine what that is. However, if an infinite being exists and has infinitely more knowledge than us, would we expect that it's possible he might have answers to something that are different than the way we feel? Yes. That means we have to be very careful using phrases like that, Okay? The last one would be, I know we're about to, second bell hasn't hit. Okay? Don't ignore the process or brush it under the rug. Okay? The reason I say that is because sometimes we want to just push questions to the side our whole life, but it's going to do a few different things. Number one, they're going to grow. Even if there are good answers to them, if you never explore them, they're going to continue to grow. They're going to weigh on your faith. They're going to keep you from having the vibrant relationship with God that you could have if you had asked the hard questions and worked through them. Okay? You can't run a full-scale, deep investigation of everything in life. When you wake up, say, am I really awake? Is the bed really here? I'm going to step on the floor. Is it lava? Is it lava? You can't do that with every single thing you do. Right? You have to operate by faith in many ways, but there are things that are too important to take without any questions. And the substance of your faith, Christ, His resurrection, the inspiration of the Bible, all those things, those are in that category. Right? Okay, thank you so much. I've already run out of time, so go forth and ask questions, I guess. I don't know.